Reconnecting. Okay, we are live. With apologies to everyone on getting the time zone completely wrong with the change back to standard time. Dustin and I showed up at the summertime, and so we'll keep this short. Dustin's got some updates for us, and then we'll post the video with our apologies. Dustin, please take it.
All right. So, just kind of, I want to go through our usual process here. In the last 2 weeks, we've landed the operations from Task Champion, which is exposing basically the changes that are made to each task back to TaskWarrior so that it can see what was changed. And that has two effects, which are fixing things that were broken when we went to 3.0. So one of those is task info now shows the journal output, when the task was added, when different modifications were made, when it was started and stopped, and including the duration when it stopped. And the other one is a slightly better output in the undo confirmation. So it'll say, these are the operations I'm about to undo. Do you want to continue? So those are both kind of better phrased now. There's been some minor changes, updates in how Task Champion Sync server handles situations where the server has lost its state and is going back to, and the client wants to upload a new version. That's supposed to be supported. There was a minor bug where the server would basically say, I give a 404, and then the client wouldn't try again, even though actually if it tried to upload a new version, it would be fine. So we fixed that in the sync server. And in TaskWarrior, let's see, we have the undo report being readable, task info, the two things I mentioned. There was a bug about, hello. David, I'm glad you could make it. I'm really sorry about the time zone mix-up. We both had ours in our local time zones, so didn't realize that the daylight savings shifted where UTC and our time zones aligned. So apologies for that. Yeah,
that makes sense.
But
how you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Good to meet you.
You too.
After all that.
So we are recording here, and I was just working on a quick update on where we are, kind of piece to camera for that.
Right.
We can chat a little bit after that.
Cool.
So yeah, so we're getting the task info and undo stuff is improved. That'll be in 3.2. And it turns out that something that I thought had been fixed in 3.1 wasn't, which is the database busy errors.
Right.
Just a mix up in terms of issues getting closed at that point. So that was said it was fixed in 3.1 and it wasn't. I think it's fixed in 3.2, so we'll see about that. And a couple other minor updates, some new changes to colors so we can support bold in 256 color mode. We have a more efficient way of getting pending tasks, so performance should improve a little bit. And we have some changes to the way we use certificate stores, worked with enterprise proxies and things like that. So I think 3.2 is going to come out. I'm sort of waiting to hear anyone say, oh my god, this thing needs to get fixed or something I've missed, but I will probably release that tomorrow in the absence of hearing anything like that.
Cool.
So that's the last 2 weeks. There's still a bunch of good first bugs out there, many of which are ready to work on, and I'm always happy to work with people that want to work on a bug. Some of those are in Task Champion, so in Rust, and some of those are in TaskWarrior, so maybe a little bit of Rust, but mostly C++, or Task Champion Sync Server, also Rust. Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now. And there's a poll in Discord to see what people would like me to work on next, with no promises that I'll actually do what people decide on. But I mostly want to focus on Task Champion stuff and trying to make kind of Task Champion the core of an ecosystem of apps that interact with it. So there's already an ecosystem of apps that talk to TaskWarrior. Some of those are sort of unmaintained or have relied on things that have changed in TaskWarrior because it's not a great API to integrate with. So I want to try and do the things in Task Champion that will make it easier to build apps that integrate with it, whether that's a mobile app or whatever. So a lot of those are sync, interfacing to other languages, and then improving Task Champion Sync Server. So most of these are actually about sync. But those are all kinds of things that would be interesting to me, and I'm just not sure which one of them to work on next. And the kind of implicit bit in that is I don't really want to be the TaskWarrior maintainer. TaskWarrior works well enough for me. I've scratched my itches there. And I'm happy to hang around and fix bugs where I can, but I don't want to kind of take on long-term projects in TaskWarrior. So hopefully, if there are those projects, Recurrence is one of them probably. If other people want to step up and work on those, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to share repo ownership and do the stuff to make sure that can happen. But I'm not going to take on another big project like that within TaskWarrior in the near future. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I think that's the update. Any other questions or things I should cover there?
I just had one.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I just had one question, and that was the other tasks or the other apps around. Why can't I remember the name of your sync program?
Task Champion.
Task Champion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there ones that are top of mind that you're wanting to work on?
I don't necessarily want to work on any of them, but things that I would like to see integrated is probably, well, because I use Bug Warrior, and I know that's Ryan Everett is the current maintainer of that, so to talk to him. I don't know if he's planning on doing that. And there's been some work, that's in Python, and there's been some work on a Python interface already. But it would be really nice to have a mobile app, whether that's iOS only or Android only, or something in Flutter or something that could work on both of those platforms. I've never done mobile development. I don't know, maybe I'll work on that, but it seems like my first mobile app being something that I want to use personally and I would like other people to use is probably not the best idea. So ideally someone who's done some mobile development can work on that, and maybe I can, certainly I would be willing to help with that. And then I think there's room for things like FreeSync and in the AM to work with Task Champion as sort of web-based task managers. Those would be neat. I guess the other integrations I can think of are things like Beat that Chad, who was at the last meeting, works on. I think those are mostly TaskWarrior. They're meant to be TaskWarrior flavored. So I think those will probably still remain working with TaskWarrior directly. But there's probably a long tail of little integrations, things that just bridge some other service into TaskWarrior or present your set of tasks in some console-y kind of way that's different from TaskWarrior, maybe a kind of menu in your console or something on your desktop background or something like that. Those could be neat little apps, maybe little things in the corner of your tray. Those could be neat things for someone to build, and I think building those in a language that interfaces with the Rust would probably be easier than executing the task binary every minute up that tray or something like that. So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about trying to make an ecosystem out of.
There was one GNOME, I forget what it's called, Task Whisperer maybe. That was a GNOME plugin that worked pretty good for Linux.
I was going to say I haven't heard of that, but the link was purple in the search results, so I guess I have heard of it.
Yeah. So that was one, and Foreground just sort of went end of life, right? Foreground was the only sort of functioning TaskWarrior mobile app.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
And there was one several years ago that had real promise. The developer really got the whole, functioning of TaskWarrior, but he gave up on that too. I have a fork of it, but it worked great.
Is that the TaskDroid?
No, you know what? I'm gonna pop up my laptop, my GitHub repo. I forget what it was. I think it was also written in C++. But just see here, GitHub. Here we go.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if you guys know, but I'm like the original designer of TaskWarrior.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I actually
Wow.
I came up with the name and registered that, and I worked with Paul for many years.
Okay.
And I I designed features like UDAs and got him to do colors, designed all the reports. Urgency was a concept of mine. Basically, I goaded him for years to how about this, how about this, how about this, and I was feeling like we were, Paul and Thomas had both sort of run out of jam. But it was my sort of feeling that the TaskWarrior 2.x series just needed a fix of recurrences, and there was some discussion. Thomas's idea was in terms of database modification. He was saying that the original TaskWarrior database was so close to JSON lines. It was, one tweak away from JSON lines,
Yeah.
which would open that data to all kinds of web interface and stuff. But now we're on to task 3x. So I guess my question would be, because like I developed an ecosystem of kind of like dozens of little plugins. I worked with the Task Open developer, Johannes, and a lot of developers. I jumped in and sort of shared my overall understanding of the TaskWarrior ecosystem at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So my hang on a sec. Just trying to find my stuff. I was going to say, I find myself with this ecosystem of Task 2x applications and modifications and stuff like that. So I kind of worry about losing access to all of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they'll all be rendered non-functional. So I guess I'm kind of hoping to somehow preserve the flawed TaskWarrior 2x base. So if 3x hits the repos, then 2x is effectively gone for us, right?
Yeah. Well, I think if it was handled the way Python 3 was, for example, then maybe not. Yeah, which would, I think, had basically been a task 3 package, and the task 2, the existing task package remains the 2.x range.
Yeah. It occurred to me on that note, and that's maybe something to consider, is that when 3x is ready for general release and distribution, maybe it would be distributed as Task Champion, not TaskWarrior 3.
Yeah. Well, so that ship has sailed. We've released 3.0,
Okay.
and 3.2 is coming out tomorrow, probably. So,
and is that in the repos?
and a lot of the repos, a lot of them. I'm not sure off the top of my head which have and haven't, but
Okay.
many of them have released at least 3.02, some of them 3.1.
Yeah.
So we'll see when they get to 3.2.
Yeah.
That was one of the kind of things that we're looking for some help with, is someone to just be on top of the distros, and when they're updating and sort of prodding them to say, hey, 3.2 was released 2 weeks ago, are you going to package that? To try and keep them up to date. So I think I was saying earlier in the process, like, I'd be very happy to have someone maintaining the 2.x series.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear that. I'm not sure how we go about doing that with the distros. But.
Yeah. I guess I can fork it and keep it local or whatever. I just wondered if there was a thought to maintaining the 2x series for those of us who develop dozens of plugins and ways of working with 2x, because I'm probably going to want to stay with that. So I like the database format. All of my stuff sort of worked,
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot to maintain, really.
Well, just availability.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's really the question for the distros, figuring out, is there
Yeah.
some way that they can make it easier for someone to stay on 2.x. But you would probably want to do a 2.7 release at some point with bug fixes or
Yeah.
holiday updates, something, right? So having some way to ship that separately to the distros would be important. Or maybe it's just a thing where you put a bunch of binaries on GitHub, and the way to install this for people that want to stick with it is here's where we download the binaries for ARM and x86 and all of that. Like that can be an effective way to distribute something. Command line. I think people who can use TaskWarrior can figure that out, whereas maybe a lot of other apps, that would be a difficult way for things to get installed. But that might be a reasonable way
I'm
to
pretty used to
distribute it.
compiling it.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that have filed bugs and things like that, I'll say, can you compile the latest main? And 2 days later, they've done it with no questions asked. So, the advantage of this product is the user base is pretty technically sophisticated. So, I don't think we necessarily need to get Ubuntu to make this a one-liner to install Task 2 in order to have people still be able to use that version.
No, it sort of was working in the 2.x world.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just hoping that somehow there's a way to maintain the 2x series for those of us who don't want to jump to Pass Champion.
Well, I guess what I'd say is, why don't you get a discussion or an issue started in the repo, just to kind of, because I think you'll find other people that want this too, and kind of gather a community there, and then figure out what technical steps we need to take to accomplish that. We'll make them happen. So get issues filed for the technical bits, and we can do that. And if that means getting GitHub releases set up, that's great. If that means going out to some of the distro maintainers, we can work on that. If that means I don't know what that means, but we'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Or maybe it's a fork in another repo and it just sits there because there's no active 2x developers, it seems.
Right. Yeah. There's relatively few developers overall. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. That's up to you. If you want to make a separate repo, that's cool. But I think we could easily maintain the 2 branches within this repo if that's if that doesn't cause other problems.
Yeah. And I understand it will grow longer in the tooth. It will.
I mean, it was pretty long in the tooth. Anyway, there was a long hiatus of like 4.5 years or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a long time with no releases, so I don't think that's going to slow it down too much.
For sure.
And there may be things that can be backported. I mean, I can think of a few simple things like the bold 256 color stuff. Like that would probably still. Maybe you want to cherry pick some patches from the 3.x version into 2.x. I think broad swaths of the code base haven't changed. Certainly the TDB and the task structure have changed quite a bit, but most of the commands haven't changed. Most of the command line parsing hasn't changed. The eval values, all that stuff is, still the same source files. So I'm sure if changes to those, you'd be able to backport pretty easily. And I don't see why you couldn't at least make 2.6.3 or 2.7 release out of those.
No, I like to think I was a decent designer, but I'm a terrible programmer. It's me for rudimentary bash scripts is just about where I'm at, and occasional help from the other developers in the a lot of the plugins I've helped to develop, of course, have been working with actual programmers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm sure you'll find some other interesting people that still want to use 2.6. If you make a discussion out of that, and I'm sure you can find a skill base in there to get what needs to be done here.
Yeah, I mean, and like from the 2x series, like I was saying, the only things from my perspective that were missing was recurrence, which was a big one, and that was it. Basically, it was like that close to that's all you need. Just get that recurrence going. Thomas had some ideas for it, but didn't want to get back into the code.
You mean a recurrence overhaul, so replacing the existing recurrence architecture,
or updating or fixing it. The concept was good. The execution. I had to work with Thomas's plugins there. Thomas's what do you call them? The little things that get. It's been a while. But Thomas did have a recurrence fix as an additional bit of code, and it worked pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't know about TaskWiki either. Are there any TaskWiki users? Anybody
I
using
haven't heard a lot
TaskWiki?
about that recently.
So when
Yeah.
I put up a poll in Discord the other day, I mentioned TaskWiki and nobody voted for it. So either those people are just very quiet or they've disappeared. Not sure which.
Yeah, that's funny because I thought that was an amazing bit of code. If you use like a Vim or Vim Outliner, or not Vim Outliner but VimWiki. If you use VimWiki, TaskWiki on top of that was fantastic. And I developed a TaskWiki opener that used templating to totally build the initial TaskWiki for a project. So I'd say, TaskWiki open new project name, and it would populate a whole TaskWiki page with that specific thing. Anyway, I guess that's really all I have to add is that it would be great if some thought to maintaining availability of the 2x base would be great.
Yeah, I think I've addressed that. Like, that's great. I'm not going to do that, but I would really like to see that happen.
Yeah.
But I think the other side of that is it'd be really great to see a lot of these tools like TaskWiki, the Android apps that are out there. They're also kind of in stasis right now, and it'd be great to see those get picked up and further development happen on them. And I think a lot of them could benefit from interfacing with 3.0, whether that's just changing the way they invoke task, and whatever kind of incompatibilities they see, or talking directly to Task Champion. Like there's several different technical approaches for that, but getting those updated so that they're using and interfacing with the more recent versions would kind of hopefully get them involved in a. I would like to see a kind of snowball effect of development here, where TaskWarrior itself is moving faster than it was for those 4.5 years or whatever it was that it was quiet. Like TaskWarrior moves faster, Task Champion is another way to hook into this, so that sort of gathers more snow into the snowball. And some of these things, either TaskWiki gets sort of woken up and brought along. I don't mean to pick on TaskWiki itself. I don't know if that's actively developed or not, but some of these tools that have kind of been in stasis for a while. Either the developers are like, oh, this is cool, I can do this thing, and they hook into it, or someone else picks them up and forks them, or builds something that's inspired by them, and we kind of get a new, exciting ecosystem going, and kind of put some fire back into the way TaskWarrior was in maybe 2018, 2015, somewhere around there. Like there was a lot of active development there, and then it kind of cooled off, and I want to warm that back up again. So the only reservation I'd have about a 2.6 branch is that I don't want to attract too much. I don't want to split that fire. I'm talking about fire and snowballs. It's mixed metaphors all over the place here, but I don't want to split that community into the 5 2.6 developer community and the 5-person 3.0 developer community when we could be a 10-person TaskWarrior community. But if that's not a problem, like we can make that work. So.
Well, it's my impression that there's 0 Task 2.6 developers at the moment.
Right, and there certainly aren't 10 Task Champion developers at the moment either.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just back up my binaries and stuff.
Yeah. Well, start that discussion. Let's see how that turns out, and maybe, I'm sure people will have thoughts and opinions and be willing to help in different ways, or not.
And actually, I don't know if you want to, for your amusement, sometime check out my my GitHub repo with all kinds of, like I was really curating as much as developing, and so I've managed to rescue a bunch of code, and I think there's some. From my perspective, there's some really interesting ideas and uses around TaskWarrior on that GitHub repo, like little things that are designed to do something that I didn't really get much practice And like I said, I'm
Yeah.
a pretty
Which
terrible
repo in particular are you referring to?
The name is Linux Cafe. That's 2 F's. Linux.
Oh,
CAFE.
yeah. I found that. I thought you were talking about the specific repo in there. It looks like there's a lot of repos.
Oh no,
in
no,
TaskWarrior.
it's just my GitHub
Gotcha.
site. Yeah. So sometime, if you know, for your amusement, try cruising there just to look at the goofy ideas, not necessarily the code.
Yeah.
But things like, well, there's a bunch of them. So for example, there was one that I designed as a time of day. So let's say you have a task that you know you want to do in the evening. So you put an EVE tag, and so it's a reverse filter. So if the time of day, according to cron, is not even, then don't show me those tasks that are for morning or afternoon or weekend or whatever. You know, little stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And there was another one actually that you know, there's urgency, and if you look at the definition of urgency, it's something that needs to happen soon, but it's not something that's important. Importance is completely different from urgency. So I made a little plugin that I used. I don't know if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So I would tag. I have a UDA for that, and each task would have a 1 to 6 assignment of which Maslow needs that. And the concept being, if you have Maslow needs of 1, that's the only task you should look at. And you only get to see Maslow need 2 once all your Maslow need 1s are done. And all the way up the line, right? And so that would completely drive what's important. It would filter out everything that's not of that level of importance, which is different from urgency.
Yeah.
Anyway, more goofy ideas.
I wonder. I mean, I wonder how many of those ideas would work just fine with the 3.0 series as well.
No idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I haven't really wrapped my head around the changes that Task Champion causes, so I don't know what will work and what will break.
I think the only thing that you would, the main thing that would be breaking would be anything that tries to look at the data files themselves. The data files are gone. So if it was kind of interpreting that TaskWarrior format directly, then it won't work with 3.0. It'll have to be kind of changed.
Most of the things I did
if it's used like
TaskWarrior directly.
Those should pretty much work. So for things that invoke task directly, that might cause breakage are just around the way output is formatted. So like I said, the task journal, the info journal got changed, and the words aren't the same, right? So if you were grabbing something out of that, you might have to change those regexes or something like that. But I was at pains to remain. I think a lot of things look at that info journal to look at the durations to do time tracking for tasks, and so we made sure that that's still in there. So at least should be a relatively straightforward change if you're looking for that kind of data. So I would expect that a lot of things that are invoking tasks would still work just fine with TaskWarrior 3.0, as long as they're not looking at that data format. And if there are small bugs in the back where we like accidentally put a full stop at the end of a sentence that wasn't there or something like that, like we can fix some of those bugs. Some of them just because of the different data format, the way that something was expressed before doesn't make sense anymore, and those we're just going to have to figure out how to work on those. But for the most part, the idea is to be as compatible as possible, and that's pretty
sure. Compatible. But in order to try it, I'd have to convert my data, and there's no way back.
I mean, you can keep the old data files. So yeah, there certainly is ways back. Like make a copy of them, do it in a Docker image if you want to make sure you don't mess anything up.
No.
You know, I think experimenting with it shouldn't be too difficult. If you want to convert for a week and then decide to go back, then all those changes for that week, yes, would be a little bit. You'd have to export them from 3.0 and import them into 2.0 and lose some history. So possible disadvantages there if you kind of want to get full into it and experiment. But if you just want to import your database and run one of these curated tools that you have and see if it still works, that should be perfectly practical without any risk to your task database.
Okay. Well, I'll consider that. Cool.
And I did want to loop back and say the Android app, I was looking through your repos and saw this. The Android app was TaskWarrior C2. I believe.
Yeah,
Lost it
and
now.
and it was really promising. In that there was in the interface ways to deal with a lot of the TaskWarrior stuff we do on the desktop.
Yep. Yeah, I liked it a lot, and I think the development went away, and then it didn't install on a newer version of the phone. That's the downside of mobile apps. I think you really they have to be active, or they just stop working. I mean, they have to be actively developed, or they just stop working. So,
yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm glad you could stop by. I didn't recognize your name. I knew the Linux Cafe. I didn't realize from your human name that it was the same person. So I apologize for not recognizing who you were.
Oh no, that's all good. That's all good. Yeah, I'm the guy who said to Paul, we should call it something other than task because that's a bit generic.
So it's a funny bit of my history is that I worked for a long time at Mozilla on a project called Task Cluster, and then got interested in working on TaskWarrior, and then sort of decided to fork it and thought Warrior sounds kind of violent. Can we find something less violent sounding? So I chose Task Champion because that sounded very positive, and that was kind of my fork of it. And then talking to Tomas, we decided to recombine the two. So now Task Champion and TaskWarrior play nice together. But apparently I just work on projects that have task in the name, so that's my career.
Well, I understand. We all got tasks.
Yeah, that's a never-ending business.
Well, good to meet you, Dustin. Yeah.
You too. And Wesley.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers. And I will. I'll drop. I'm always ghosting, always following development, and I'll.
Good to know you're there.
Again.
Yeah, sounds good. Wesley, did you want to talk about anything else today, or should we wrap up?
Nope, that's all I've got. So thank you very much for this super interesting conversation. I look forward to hearing what other people think about it when I post it.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.